So, this article titled Fidelity Predicts $1 billion Bitcoin uh, caught my eye. And that's the point. It's a clickbait title for an article, but it actually is true. Someone at Fidelity, which is an investment company, I think they control something like $5 trillion in assets. So Fidelity is big Wall Street money for sure. And apparently, the director of global macro at Fidelity, he publicly predicted $1 billion Bitcoin by 2038. Now, let's break down this prediction. What is the basis or the model for predicting $1 billion Bitcoin by 2038? Well, this chart from Fidelity that appears to be the basis for this prediction. And it has two variables that it plots. And these two variables are essentially the origin of this prediction. So we have the stock to flow model, as well as the S curve adoption model. So let's just break down these two variables quickly to see what we're dealing with for the basis of this prediction of $1 billion Bitcoin. So the stock to flow model, it's just basically the idea that every 4 years, the supply of new Bitcoin coming into the market is cut in half. So at first, there's 50 Bitcoin as a block reward. Every 10 minutes on average, miners received 50 Bitcoin. After 4 years, that went down to 25. After 4 years, that went down to 12.5. Now we're down to 6.25 Bitcoin as a block reward. Every 4 years, it's just going to keep getting cut in half. This is going to happen until 2140. And of course, the result of this model is that as time goes on and demand for Bitcoin increases, there just isn't that much of a supply. In fact, the supply of new Bitcoin coming onto the market to satisfy demand is ever decreasing. Every 4 years, it's cut in half. And that has resulted, historically so far, in an exponential rise in Bitcoin's price. Because if supply does not adjust to demand, the only variable that can change to satisfy demand is price. And this is exactly what we have seen. So every halving so far, there's been approximately a 10x in the Bitcoin price. That's the essence of the stock to flow model. And this applies to gold as well. Gold historically was very good money because it had such a high supply, an existing supply, that even all the mining in the world was only able to inflate the gold supply by a couple percent. But of course, what makes Bitcoin superior money to gold is that its stock to flow ratio is just out of this world. By I think it's 2032, 99% of all Bitcoin to ever exist will have already come onto the market. 99%. From 2032 to 2140. So, in essence, for that 100 plus years, over a century, the block reward will be the remaining 1% of Bitcoin will be the only new supply coming onto the market. That's incredible. And then after that, after 2140, that's it. There is no more flow. There is no more new Bitcoin coming onto the market. But we can see even by 2036, when hopefully we will still be alive, 99% of the supply is already in the market, and the 1% new supply remaining will only trickle into the market over the next century. The reason why Bitcoin keeps going up, well, this is one of the reasons why. is the extraordinary stock to flow dynamics with Bitcoin. Absolutely extraordinary from a monetary perspective. So that is one of the factors being used in this Fidelity prediction of $1 billion Bitcoin. What's the other factor? It's the S-curve adoption factor, and this is based on Metcalfe's law. Metcalfe's law it basically describes how a network, the value of a network grows exponentially relative to the growth of adoption. So if the network doubles in users, its value actually grows by the square of 2. So if it doubles, its value grows by 4. And that's a very interesting model, because with Bitcoin we can see that it's not that we are not at the stage where growth is measured linearly with Bitcoin. We are still in the exponential growth phase of the network, of how many users are adopting Bitcoin. But with Metcalfe's law, the value of the network is exponential relative to the adoption. So that's insane. We're talking about the exponential of an exponential. So this is another factor, another reason why Bitcoin just keeps going up, because even with linear network growth, the value of a network is still growing exponentially. This is another reason why Bitcoin just keeps going up. It's because of Metcalfe's law. It's because we're not even at the stage of Bitcoin. Like, we're so early into Bitcoin that its network growth, its adoption is still not able to be measured on a linear scale. But of course, with Metcalfe's law, the value of the network is an exponential of its adoption. So we're in a stage where exponential growth is compounded exponentially. This is why Bitcoin just is going from, $100 to 1,000 to 10,000, and now we're going to be going to 100,000. It just doesn't seem to stop. The reason why it doesn't stop is because of Metcalfe's law. Viewed from this perspective, what we see in the phenomenon of Bitcoin actually is not surprising. It's rather predictable. It's just that humans don't really think exponentially. We think in linear terms. But if you view it from the perspective of how exponentials work, you apply the Metcalfe's law, you apply the stock to flow model, and you start to see why Bitcoin keeps going up. In this particular case, looking at Fidelity's prediction, they seem to be combining the factor of Metcalfe's law with the stock to flow model to end up at this prediction of $1 billion Bitcoin by 2038. I think the important takeaway, first of all, is just to understand the stock to flow model, as well as the Metcalfe's law, the idea that the value of a network grows exponentially compared to its adoption. These are important concepts to understand because they reveal why Bitcoin keeps going up. And these models provide us with a method of extrapolating what Bitcoin's value could be in the future. Now, my criticism of this prediction would be that the denominator is the US dollar. So they're using a fiat currency denominator to value Bitcoin. What will $1 billion be worth in 2038? Sure, okay, so let's use this model and let's predict $1 billion Bitcoin. But it almost certainly $1 billion will not be worth what $1 billion is today. When we're talking about the value in fiat terms a couple decades in the future, I just don't really think it's very useful to think in terms of dollars. I don't really think it doesn't tell us very much when we say that Bitcoin will be $1 billion by 2038. I think it's more useful to look at the stock to flow model, to look at Metcalfe's law. It's really important to understand these factors because it provides a basis, a grounded, rational basis for why we expect Bitcoin to be worth exponentially more in the future. The problem is when you are measuring Bitcoin's future value in terms of fiat, the longer you look in the future, the less this is a meaningful measure. When we're talking about 20 years in the future, 2038, I don't. Dollar price predictions really are not useful at all. Just the takeaway is using the stock to flow model, using Metcalfe's law, we can rationally extrapolate that yes, Bitcoin will indeed be worth exponentially more than it is today. We just don't really know what denominator to measure that value against. And that's kind of the point, isn't it? That's kind of the point. Fiat is such a poor denominator. It's such a poor unit of account. It's such a poor measure of value for precisely this reason. You can't really predict, you can't use it to extrapolate the value of something very far into the future. That's the whole point of why Bitcoin is so superior as money. Now, to be fair to Fidelity's prediction, apparently one of the reasons for the prediction, according to this article, is the devaluation and unraveling of the current fiat monetary system. So what Fidelity is saying is, yes, we believe that Bitcoin will be worth $1 billion in 2038. And one of the reasons for this is because the fiat system is failing. This is an explicitly expressed reason from a Wall Street bank. A Wall Street bank, Fidelity Investments, which controls, $5 trillion in assets, they are saying that they predict $1 billion Bitcoin, and one of the reasons why they predict it is because they believe the fiat monetary system is unraveling. This is the real story here. The real story is not the clickbait headline of Fidelity predicts $1 billion Bitcoin. The real story is that Wall Street is not only getting into Bitcoin, but they are getting into Bitcoin because they see the fiat monetary system unraveling. And they are openly announcing this to the world. This is the real story. Not only is Wall Street getting into Bitcoin in a big way, we can see here that Fidelity is seeking SEC approval for a Bitcoin ETF. Fidelity is buying huge stakes in Bitcoin miners. Fidelity is creating custody solutions for institutional clients. Fidelity reports that 90% of its biggest clients are interested in buying Bitcoin. This is the real story. Forget the clickbait title. Forget $1 billion prediction. What we see here is it's right in front of our faces. Wall Street is saying we're all in on Bitcoin, and we're doing it because the fiat currency system is going to fail. And this is just Fidelity, of course, but What do you think the rest of Wall Street is doing right now? Do you think that all the other major investment banks and so forth, do you think that they are looking at Fidelity and scoffing and just laughing at them and saying, "Oh, that's ridiculous"? No. No. To the extent that Fidelity is doing this, all of Wall Street is going to be doing this. Fidelity is just a little bit ahead of the curve, and I guarantee you that in boardrooms across Wall Street, they are all talking about Bitcoin because they know that getting left behind at this point in terms of Bitcoin is going to be the difference between life and death for their banks. So the real story is not the $1 billion prediction here. The real story is that you have an investment company like Fidelity basically going all in on Bitcoin. And this is, to conclude this video, this is why I keep hammering home the message that the window of opportunity is closing for the little guy, for the average person. These investment banks, these Wall Street banks, they are going all in on Bitcoin. They are just, they're slow to move because of institutional inertia. They're slow to move in the same way that an oil tanker takes a long time to turn around. It takes a long time to change its course. Whereas us little guys, we are on agile little yachts. We can turn on a dime. We can respond to the opportunity provided by Bitcoin rapidly compared to these major institutions. But we have to take advantage of the opportunity before they are able to course correct. And they are right in the middle of course corrections. They are moving into Bitcoin in a very real way. They are moving into Bitcoin because, as we see from this article, they are explicitly stating that Bitcoin is the future because the fiat monetary system is unraveling. This is Wall Street saying this. So if you are hesitating to establish a strong position, a strong core position in Bitcoin, if you're hesitating to do so, recognize that your opportunity to front run Fidelity is rapidly diminishing. And that's exactly what you are doing when you buy Bitcoin, or if you are holding Bitcoin that you bought a while ago. Because literally what is happening is Fidelity is saying we're all in on Bitcoin because the fiat currency system is unraveling. And if you are already in Bitcoin, you are literally front-running Fidelity Investments. That's a great position to be in. It's basically unknown in the history of investing to be in this privileged position as just an average person. We are the ones that are early to the show. Fidelity is late. And yet, from another perspective, looking at the stock-to-flow model, looking at Metcalfe's law, Fidelity is very early, and they know it. But that just goes to show how early we are. If we are already holding, and we have been holding perhaps for a few years, even if not, now is still a golden opportunity. Fidelity knows it, and you should too. I don't know what Bitcoin's dollar value will be in 2038, and it doesn't matter. And I think Fidelity knows that too.